So this is the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. This is one of the most secure, secret military facilities in the entire country. Basically, no one is allowed inside, but we're going into the secret Norad control center. How protected are we right now?
We're well protected right now. This place was built to withstand multiple megaton nuclear blast about 1.5 miles away from the mountain.
What does that mean? I mean, like someone dropped. Explain that a little bit.
So a megaton is equal to 1 million tons of TNT. So to give you an idea of how big that is, the Hiroshima bombs that we're all familiar with from World War II were 15 kilotons. A 15 megaton nuclear bomb would be 1,000 times more powerful than that. So this place can withstand a blast like that, provided it's not right on top.
so a bomb 1,000 times stronger than Hiroshima.
That's right.
We could survive right where we're standing.
That's right. Yes.
It's amazing.
It is. Yeah. 2,000 feet of rock over us, and then if you see on these metal bulkheads that you see here are designed to absorb electromagnetic pulses from nuclear bombs to protect all the sensitive electronics that we have inside this facility.
What sparked them to build this?
So at the beginning of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union really were building up huge arsenals of nuclear weapons, and by the time that this was it was recognized by the Norad commander that Cheyenne Mountain, a complex like Cheyenne Mountain was necessary, the Soviet Union had launched its famous Sputnik satellite over the Earth. At that point in time, Americans all realized that the Soviet Union was going to be capable of launching intercontinental ballistic missiles towards the United States in short time. And so it became an imperative for the command and control facilities for the North American Aerospace Defense Command to be protected against a blast from a Soviet nuclear missile.
In terms of, I mean, this seems like a real engineering feat.
It was.
I mean, how does this sort of fit in with this has got to be one of a kind.
It's not necessarily one of a kind in the United States, but it is probably the best example of a protected shelter for command and control facilities. It's the largest, the most well equipped, and has, I would argue, the best history of any of them. Has
a rich history.
It does have one, yes. Yeah, it has a rich history. Construction started in July or June of 1961 and finished in early 1966. This place was considered at full operational capability by April of 1966. So in 5 years, they took out several million tons of rock, and they built the buildings that you see here. And if you get a chance to walk inside, the buildings that you'll see inside, along with all the industrial plant that supports everything, the power generation, water facilities, sewage facilities, and everything else that went along with it. So it was quite an engineering triumph. It cost, in today's dollars, it cost about $1.5 billion. And half of that actually was the computer equipment that they installed in there. The computer equipment was cutting edge technology. It was the most powerful computers of their day. The same computers that they were using for the Apollo program to put a man on the moon, they had installed into Cheyenne Mountain at that time.
Where did all the alien rumors come from?
Probably Stargate might have a little bit to go with that. I think the show the movie Stargate had them go through the Stargate in Cheyenne Mountain.
And can you officially say no aliens?
I can officially say there's nothing in the historical record about aliens being in here.
This is the Norad Air Chief. I label track Whiskey Mike 253.
We're in the middle of the mountain right now. This is the NORAD command center behind me. This place would be bustling with action if there was some kind of emergency somewhere on the continent, a nuclear war, some kind of attack. This is called the battle deck where I am. This is where all of our nation's leaders would be sitting and coordinating.
All right, looks like we have a 7500 in the presidential TFR. Sox, ring out at Operation Noble Eagle Conference.
Yes, sir.
General Guillot, are you in the conference with a good picture?
Copy. What we witnessed, the sort of the mock drill, what are you guys doing there?
Okay, so what's happened there is the aircraft are being controlled by air traffic control, and then the aircraft has done something that it shouldn't have. And there's a whole bunch of criteria that can trigger that, and then that becomes a target of interest. And we get notified here, and the Command Center Director makes the decision to bring out an Operation Noble Eagle Conference. And then a number of, there's a few variants of Noble Eagle Conferences, quick pull, short pull, and long pull, depending on how imminent the aircraft is to a target of interest, or sorry, a presumed target. So once that gets rung out, a number of players get brought onto the conference, and then we ring in some of the assessors, the people that will make decisions on what we're ultimately going to do with this aircraft. So what you witnessed there was the CCD, Command Center Director, ringing out the ONEC, and then I labeled it, and then we pass that off. We make sure that the generals are in, the assessors are in the conference, and they have a good picture, and then we ask the region to go ahead with an update and give the generals the latest information. And so now the conference proceeds, and we launch fighters, or if there's fighters in the air, the region will do that, makes those decisions, and then ultimately, as the scenario progresses, it could ultimately lead in a shoot down. And ideally, we're trying to de-escalate this. So you want to go up, see what's going on with these aircraft, maybe have the fighters come alongside and see what they see. Maybe they're having trouble with their flight controls or their radios or whatnot. And so we get some information, and we can help them to land or divert to another airfield. Or ultimately, if it does turn out to be a bad guy, and that's the scenario you saw, was a hijacked aircraft that was going to ultimately be shot down and that was a training scenario that we trained the whole enterprise to do.
It seems like it can get serious very quickly.
Yeah, it can get serious, and it also can get very confusing. Not confusing, but I don't know what the proper word is. But there's another, like when we have multiple of these targets that happen at the same time, which we train to, decisions have to be made which one's the highest priority, and there's specific timelines and criteria by which the generals will ultimately make the decision to shoot the aircraft down. So, yeah, it can get pretty. I guess the training allows you to filter through like some of the confusion and juggling 2 or 3 or 4 balls at the same time. Because when one target's doing something and they're discussing another one, the whole enterprise, we're kind of a backup down there to inject information into the conference that perhaps the assessors or the people making the decisions have missed, whether an aircraft is turned or is descending or sped up, something like that, or turned to another target. That's kind of what we're there for.
So where we're standing right now, this seems like a place you just hope never actually has to be activated, or we're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for what you witnessed there, that happens almost, I'd say, a couple or 3 times a week in general. But most of the time, in my entire time down here, we've been able to de-escalate. So maybe it's a pilot error who hasn't read his NOTAMs. He's just gone into an area that he shouldn't have. So whenever the POTUS travels around the U.S., if he's outside of Washington, D.C. proper, we put up a temporary flight restriction, and during the day we have aircraft flying overhead with a tanker, and they are meant to protect POTUS. And when people some person has a small plane and just goes out on a daily VFR flight, he or she is not used to that, not used to a POTUS TFR being overlaid on top of where they're going, and so they get into a bit of hot water with NORAD.
We're deep in the mountain now. We've got to go through these two massive, just huge bomb blast doors. How thick are these things?
Well, they're about 3 feet thick, and you can see my wingspan approximating it for you here. But that's one of the features, and of course we've got several other attributes that are associated with the blast doors here.
What do these protect from?
Basically, Cheyenne Mountain was designed to mitigate the effects of a nuclear blast wave that would impact in the Colorado Springs area.
How hard is it to close these things?
It's actually pretty easy. We've got a system that we can do it remotely. We can do it on site here. And they can close very readily. We actually maintain them and swing these doors closed once a week. Once upon a time, they closed for operations inside Cheyenne Mountain, and they were only cycled with crew shift changes, and they were closed again. But today's environment, more open situation, and so the blast doors pretty much stay in their open configuration unless there's reason to close them.
So if things get tense, you close the doors?
Yes. Last time we did it for a real world reason was actually at 9/11. NORAD had crews inside the mountain, 9/11/2001. A not very well known event was happening from the West Coast. I mean, we all concentrate about what happened 9/11 with the World Trade Center, Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, but there was actually a flight coming out of California heading west that caused the command center to initiate their checklist to close the blast doors due to that flight pilot being non-responsive, didn't know the intent. That was the last time Cheyenne Mountain closed its doors for a real-world reason.
Welcome to the most secure subway in the world. We hope you enjoy your time in the mountain. Please check out our window when you get to the dining room. Have a nice day.
Thank you again for doing this.
Glad to do it.
Appreciate it very much. We see the slogan all over the building, we have the watch. And I think just, growing up, you always hear about NORAD, and you sort of have this perception that they have an eye on everything.
Well, we try. We do have the watch. That's a slogan that we take a lot of pride in. 24/7. We're looking for threats to the United States and to North America. As you mentioned, NORAD, the neat thing on NORAD is it's a binational command. So it's not just the United States, it's the United States and Canada. So we talk about protecting North America against any air threat, and then maritime warning. The reason maritime warning is important is because weapons from the maritime will go up into the air and become an air threat. So since almost 70 years now, we've had the watch, a lot of great capability out there to help us with the watch. The adversary is expanding, and so we're expanding our capabilities as well to ensure that we can detect, track, and defeat any threats to North America.
I think a lot of people don't realize that NORAD it's Canadian also, that there's this really special partnership.
That's right. Side by side, both on this side of the border and on the north side of the border in Canada. We have Americans working in Canada, Canadians working here in the building, and it's been that way since NORAD began in '58. The really neat part about that is we look at it, when I look at threats, I look at it as what is the threat and what's the geometry to the threat, not so much where's the border and what kind of airplane, what flag is on the airplane on either side of the border. So for instance, a couple weeks ago, there were some bomb threats into Calgary, and it turns out that there was multiple, and we needed multiple sets of fighters, and so a set of fighters launched off of alert out of Canada, but we also launched some out of Portland, just because based on the geometry, those were the next fastest ones to get there. And nobody thinks twice about it because it is a binational command responsible for defending North America.
And it is about speed, we've learned since being here.
That's right. Speed, geometry helps make up for speed, and making sure that we're alert and get airborne and respond very quickly, and our crews are really good at it.
With the incursions, last week there was an incursion with a Russian jet. Back in July, I think there were 3 in 1 week alone. I think people are worried about this. Is it happening more often?
Well, Yes, it's happening more often now than it has the last several years. The number of incursions this year is already higher than it was last year, and last year it was the highest in the 3 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the number had dropped off dramatically for a couple of years and then picked up last year, and again we're higher this year, which is at a higher level than it was before the invasion. I don't know, it's not double or triple, but it's pretty consistent. And we respond quickly, very professionally, with U.S., Canadian fighters, with AWACS and with tankers. It's a team plus some ground control capability. So whenever we see the Russian or last July Chinese activity entering any of our air defense identification zones, we want to respond quickly, professionally, and let them know that we see them and we can defend the sovereignty of the United States and Canada.
How close do they get?
The Russian aircraft?
Yes.
Sometimes the closest that I think I've seen is about 20 miles. Generally, there's a 12-mile territorial boundary, and I haven't, during my time here, I've never seen any adversary aircraft approach that. But 20 to 30 miles is not uncommon.
What are they trying to signal to us when they get that close?
Well, I can't get in their mind, but I would suspect they're showing that they are also a global power. I think they're testing our response. I think they're probably practicing if they had to do an attack, how would they do that? And that's why we respond to every one of them, to let them know that it would be futile, that we would detect them, and if necessary, we could defeat the threats.
How tense does it get in those moments?
Most of the time, it's not really tense. Obviously, you want to be operationally as sharp as possible, and you don't let your guard down just because the airplanes aren't doing anything. But we've had a series of unprofessional actions by the Russians in the past, not just in our theater, but across the world that you may be familiar with. And we had one last September where a Russian aircraft came way too fast, way too close to us, and so we file it as a unprofessional, unsafe maneuver. And I'm always talking to our air crews to make sure that we don't get goaded into doing something similar. So we're always going to be extremely safe and professional during these.
When the Russian aircraft did that, and it was so provocative, is that an order that pilot got from like President Putin? I mean, does it come all the way from the top?
I don't know. I don't know.
But it is happening more.
Well, the incursions are happening more. The unsafe, unprofessional, I wouldn't say that they're happening more. They happen occasionally. We had gone several years without one in our theater, and then we had one last September. But if you look, across the globe, I wouldn't say they're frequent, but it's not unusual.
The Chinese and the Russian jet together last year, have we ever seen that happen before?
In other parts of the world, but that was the first time that it happened in the Arctic, and that's the first time it penetrated a United States air defense identification zone. So they penetrated the Alaska ADIZ together, and that's last year was the first time ever.
Was that a surprise to you?
No, because I've seen them interoperate in other theaters. We've seen them cooperate in the maritime, in the air. So I figured it was just it was going to happen soon. They have cooperated together in the maritime in and around Alaska, so it didn't surprise me when they tried it from the air. And again, we were ready.
So you were explaining to me how you always have to be ready for that call. Were you just doing your work and you got the call that it was Russia and China together? I mean, did that sort of like jolt you at all?
Well, I wouldn't say it jolted me. The first thing I asked is, do we have all the assets ready? And they did, and we scrambled. The unique thing on this one was our response was simultaneously with U.S. and Canadian fighters, because we had some Canadian fighters that were operating from a U.S. base, and they flew out and perfectly intercepted it. We're very integrated. Our planning, our flying, our data links, our radios, everything is interoperable, and then so it didn't matter if it was two sets of U.S. or a set of U.S. and a set of Canadian. It was a flawless intercept.
So many people I know are just sort of on edge right now. They see what's happening in Israel, they see what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. What do you think our biggest threats are here with the homeland and specifically?
Well, the biggest thing to remember on the homeland is when NORAD started in 1958, we were concerned about one threat, the Soviet Union, with one medium, the bomber, and from one axis of approach over the north because of the shorter distance coming over the north. Today, we have 5 or 6 legitimate threats in all domains, to include cyber, and from all avenues of approach. So I think what I try to make sure that our team here, both in NORAD and in NORTHCOM, which has different homeland defense responsibilities, is that we can't let our guard down on anything. We can't look in one direction or just look at one adversary. We have to be ready for anything, and undersea, sea, air, space, cyber.
Is there one adversary in particular that concerns you the most?
No, I give equal attention to every potential adversary.
We were at the mountain. Talk to us a little bit about the mountain. I was standing in that mountain thinking, gosh, is there something they know that we don't know? Like, they're prepared for the worst.
Yes. Well, the Cheyenne Mountain was built in 1966. It was operational. Same year I was born. It's stood the test of time probably a little bit better than I have. It's a great facility, built at the time for a nuclear threat. It's certainly is still capable in that regard. But one thing that we found that we use it for more and more frequently is just resiliency. For instance, if there's a power outage or storm or anything along those lines that could take away any of our capabilities here, we immediately have the ability to go up into Cheyenne Mountain and be fully operational. So there's a number of other tenant units or partner capabilities that flow into there. It's just a fantastic facility. It's truly worth whatever they paid for it back in the early 60s, and we're using it today just as they did for the decades before.
What would have to happen for you and your teams to actually move into the mountain?
Well, there are a number of contingencies. Like I said, it could be something simple from they're going to reboot all of our computer systems and upgrade them, and it takes a week. Most locations would really struggle with that, but we can just move up to Cheyenne Mountain. If there were, for instance, a natural disaster, whether it's a storm or prairie fire that endangered the base, we could move up there. And then anything on the operational front, if we wanted survivability and durability, we could operate from up there.
Is it a nuclear threat mainly that it was built for? Or I guess, what is it prepared to protect against?
That was one of the concerns, was the nuclear threat back in early 60s when it was developed. Like I said, we can do so much more with it now than just that.
With the Arctic in particular, how much of a concern is that?
Well, the Arctic is unique. It's very strategic, very rich in resources up there. And again, as I mentioned, it's the closest point of approach to North America is coming over the Arctic. So we spend a lot of attention, time and attention on the Arctic. It makes up of our area of responsibility, roughly 30%. So it's a big chunk of NORAD's area of responsibility, and it goes, Alaska across, all the way across Canada and into Greenland. So it's a vast area.
And this might be kind of a dumb question, but no one really owns the Arctic, right? Can anybody go out? Can any country sort of do what they want out there?
Well, some parts of the Arctic are sovereign nations. For instance, Alaska is in the Arctic, and Canada, Greenland as well. And there's some international territory up there as well. There are 8 Arctic nations, and then the Chinese call themselves a near Arctic nation for reasons that I don't understand. But so it's not uncommon to see to have exercises up there with other nations, and to see other nations in the international space up there.
Should we be concerned about these Chinese research vessels in the Arctic that claim they're just doing like scientific research?
Well, I think with the Chinese up there, as I mentioned, they call themselves a near Arctic nation. They say that these vessels are for scientific purposes, but we have reason to believe they're also looking at military applications, and if they're looking at military applications, that's something that I take into account and ensure that we can defend against anything that would come from the maritime or under the sea from any threats, to include the Chinese.
So NORAD can see under the sea also?
We have sensors that look undersea, on the sea, air, and space.
Wow. So it's changed a lot since the beginning, like you were saying.
Oh, yes,
it used
absolutely.
to just be sort of one threat.
One threat, one avenue of approach, a medium to high altitude bomber. Yeah, definitely different now. All avenues of approach.
What about, I'm trying to think I wrote down the way they phrase it with the drone, the low tech threats of concern, like drones. How much of a concern is that?
Well, I think drones are a big concern all over the world now. They've added a new element to our defense requirements. I'm confident in what we're doing to defend our installations against drones. Detecting them, tracking them, and defeating them if necessary is something that we look at both in NORTHCOM and in NORAD. But you have to be a little bit careful, because not all of those are threats. You have to treat them all as threats, because you don't know until the end. A lot of times it's just hobbyists or citizens that are flying where they shouldn't or aren't allowed, and so we try to take that into account. But of course, we're always going to defend our installations.
I just want to go back for a second. When you get the call and you only have like 90 seconds to answer the call, and someone has penetrated a sensitive airspace, what happens next?
Well, ideally, with our great detection capabilities, we see them well before they actually penetrate. And so we'll see that and talk about it. We'll launch sorties off of alert, whether it's a AWACS, a tanker, fighters, or all of the above, and then be ready to meet them as they hit the identification zone, as opposed to waiting until they've already broken it, is what we try to do. And that's using our domain awareness capability. First thing I do is I call the responsible region. So we have an Alaska region, a continental US region, and a Canadian region. Talk to the region commander or their ops center, just to make sure that the response is as we normally would. And then we have command and control systems where I can look on a common operational picture and track if we're detecting and launching there, so you don't even have to make a phone call most of the time.
Would you be the person who would have to make the call whether to shoot a plane down?
Well, I'm one of them that could, yes.
What's that? I mean, that's a big responsibility.
Well, it is, but we're very well trained. We know all the procedures. I'm probably talking to senior leaders at the same time to make sure that they see what I see. But ultimately been trained and put in a position of trust to do that, and I know the rules of engagement. I certainly know would know the situation there, and I'm sure that we would make the right decision.
I have to ask you while I'm here, because there's so much interest lately in UFOs, and people have this perception that NORAD sees everything, and we did happen to see little UFO creatures at the
we have a few places
at the mountain.
Yeah, good.
But seriously, I mean, are there things that your sensors pick up that you can't explain?
I thought you were going to ask me about tracking Santa instead of UFOs,
Yeah.
but
that
we do
comes
that
next.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do that too. Well, we try to detect everything, and then usually, we filter out what is not a threat, and then we can capture and catalog everything. And if there's something unusual, there's offices that we can share that data with. But I have never seen anything that can't be explained.
You've never seen? Okay.
No, I have not.
And my last question, which I think maybe you don't want to, I have to just ask as a reporter, but you did just come today from the meeting with the Secretary of War and President Trump.
Yes.
How was that?
That was great. As a member of the military and certainly as a commander, you always want clear guidance. We received very clear guidance. As I said to some of my teammates there in the seats, our gyros have been recaged and set, the mission's clear, and we're ready to execute.
Tell us a little bit about what Norad does.
So NORAD has been around since 1958, and it is a binational command that is defined by its purpose of defending all of North America, so the entire continent up through the Arctic. And back in the 50s when it was founded, we had basically a single access threat. So you had Russia was who we were concerned about, and we were dealing with world-ending events. So ICBM strikes, nuclear bombers coming across Russia through Alaska or through the poles. And so the binational nature of NORAD, that Canadian-American, like truly integrated partnership, was born from that threat, because if you look at a map, you can understand how much of that area of responsibility reaches up over the pole and into the Arctic. And so NORAD is very simply, to this day, maintains that mission of defending the continent of North America against threats from our adversaries.
And it's a real partnership between the United States and Canada, right?
It is a completely integrated partnership, truly unique in the world with the level of integration that we have here in the headquarters. We have an American 4-star, a Canadian 3-star, an American 2-star, and a Canadian 2-star right next to each other, and so on down the chain, shoulder to shoulder, Canadians and Americans working together, because the scope of responsibility simply demands that level of cooperation.
Yeah, it's interesting walking around the building, you see a lot of American flags, but you also see a lot of Canadian flags.
Yes, we do.
We always hear about NORAD tracking an object, or I think about the balloon that was going over the U.S., or Russian jets that get close to our borders. How busy are you guys?
Very, very busy. There is something going on every single day. So much so that we run this operation day to day out of a full-time joint operations center, which is right here in this building behind me. And then of course we've got a very famous operations center that sits in our Cheyenne Mountain that runs 24/7. So there is never a time when NORAD does not have the watch over that continent. And when you think about that, even from a time zone perspective and from a threat axis perspective, 24/7, 365, every single thing that happens across the globe is a potential concern to us here at NORAD, and that's what we're looking for.
And the slogan, we have the watch. How are you guys able to see what feels like everything?
We have a significant network of satellites overhead and radars on our coasts. And interestingly, when I say our coasts, I don't just mean like the continental United States like you would imagine, but we have radars up through the Arctic, all the way around Alaska, all the way across that northern part of Canada that looks up and out, because we can have threats from any axis. When you stitch those overhead satellites together with that ground radar network, plus our fighter patrols that we're able to fly as often as necessary, we are able to build that picture of the world. Anything that moves through the air and anything that moves through the sea through our area of responsibility, we are tracking at all times.
Is there a lot you're not allowed to say on that front?
There are a few things that we've got to keep secret, but for the most part, we are absolutely happy to have the public know that we're watching and tracking and defending at all times.
With temporary flight restrictions, like with President Trump or high-level people moving around, how do those work?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of that history. So after 9/11, our mission was completely reshaped. Now, we still maintain that outward look at anything coming in from abroad. But after 9/11, we realized that the threat has evolved, and that you have violent extremist organizations who are willing to attack us using our own vehicles from within the country, and from even within both countries. And so from that was born Operation Noble Eagle in 2001. And that concept was, can we set up temporary flight restrictions that are permanently defended by NORAD fighters? So enter our network of fighters that we have across both countries. We've got everything from Canadian F-18s to American F-22s, F-35s, F-16s, F-15s. Every fighter you can think of, we have stitched throughout the two nations that are ready to respond on a moment's notice. And by a moment, I mean 8-minute scrambles. We can have fighter jets in the air in any region that we need to defend. And so when the president moves, for example, we are going to set up one of those temporary flight restrictions around the president. And we're going to make sure that anytime he is on the ground, not in Washington, D.C., that we have fighters overhead ready to defend any threat axes that come that way. And the president's the most obvious one, but there are other things we'll defend too. We are constantly defending Washington, D.C., as you can imagine, with a layered network of defenses. And then we also have defense around major world events. So the UN General Assembly, for example, last week in New York, that was a NORAD temporary flight restriction. When we have World Cup coming to the United States here shortly, that will be a temporary flight restriction. Major events that draw big crowds that need to be defended, we will be on top of with our fighters ready to make sure nothing happens.
Is it just planes that you're looking out for, or I was thinking about drones these days?
So we do look at the entire spectrum of operations that could get into those TFRs, and we look at those very closely. Now, when you talk about the size of our TFRs out to that 30-mile range for defending the president, you have to understand that the speed of manned aircraft is significant, much more significant than a small drone. So a drone TFR may be smaller because we don't need as much warning to make decisions on those. But when you talk about an airliner or a large drone that looks like a jet, or even a Learjet or a small civilian aircraft, they are moving quite fast. So we need those TFRs to buy decision space for the boss to decide what to do about an invasion into those TFRs or an incursion.
Are there TFRs when the president travels out of the country?
There are, but they're not owned by us. So when the president travels, once he leaves our area of operations, it's picked up by a different combatant command that then takes responsibility for his travel once he gets into that continent or region.
Okay. In the movies, when you see, all the military officers sitting in a room and they scramble the jets because someone's entered airspace, whether Russia or China, I mean, that actually happens in real life in the building behind you.
It happens all the time. And that joint operations center that we have right there in the basement or in Cheyenne Mountain, that is where that room is. So that situation you're describing where we are trying to make a decision within minutes is happening right here in this operations center. How frequently? Well, we've had times where we have these conferences spun up 8 times in a single weekend. When the president moves to a new location that the general aviation community around him is not familiar with, we tend to have a whole lot of TFR violations for people who miss that critical NOTAMs check before they take off and go fly. And so, my message to the general aviation community out there, or anyone who's a pilot of any type, is make sure you check your NOTAMs and make sure you have a visual representation of that temporary flight restriction, or you could get in a lot of trouble. To scope this for you, when you bust into a NORAD TFR, you have just activated a phone call that goes from that building's operations center all the way to the Secretary of War and even potentially the President of the United States to start making decisions about what to do. Because we can sometimes assist, we can sometimes shadow, we can sometimes escort, but we are prepared to use force because General Guillot and the President do not have the luxury of waiting for a maybe, of being behind if we do have a situation like 9/11 where we have to make a critical decision in a matter of seconds. Our fighters have to be in a position and they have to be armed and ready to go in case that situation resurfaces.
How quickly do the decisions have to be made?
Airplanes move really fast. And so what you would think of as a long time, a 30-mile bubble penetration, for example, to the center of that TFR, is not even a matter of minutes in a lot of cases. We've had decisions that we've had to make within 30 seconds just this year. And when you talk about coordinating the sensor that detected that incursion in an operations center all the way up to the Secretary of War or the President of the United States, that 30 seconds goes by very quickly. And we have generals in this building called assessors, and their sole focus when those conferences kick off is to make the assessment of the threat. And they have just a fraction of a minute to do so before it's decision time.
What about with Russia and China when we hear these reports of their jets coming into our, or close to our areas? Does that all go through this building too?
That's us too. So the Combined Bomber Patrol last year, that got a lot of attention. That was the first time we saw the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian Federation fly together in a Combined Bomber Patrol. And that was just about a year ago, and that flew through our Alaskan airspace, our Alaskan buffer zone. So we intercepted that, and it got our attention. And what I think is important for people to know, as scary as it may be to see Russians and Chinese bombers flying together, is that is kind of the edge of coordination between those two nations. Whereas if you look at NORAD, we are fully integrated between two nations, the United States and Canada, on a daily basis. So it's a very different level of coordination. Nevertheless, anything that punches into those buffer zones is now considered a threat, and we're going to scramble fighters and we're going to meet that threat and we're going to escort it until it leaves our buffer zone and goes back to where it came from, which happens a lot.
When you say escort, do they just get very close to the other plane? Or?
You can find pictures of them online. We'll usually publish those through our public affairs department when they happen, and we'll fly right on the wing of the bombers. And usually you'll see the Russian bomber or the Chinese bomber and then their fighter escort and then our fighters right next to their fighters, just looking at each other going, okay, I'm watching, so either turn around or this is going to get heated.
Do they ever communicate like man to man? I mean, that's got to be a weird feeling for them looking out the window.
The important part for the American public and the Canadian public to understand is that largely these intercepts are cooperative. Our pilots are extremely professional. They are not going to antagonize. They are not going to instigate. The Russians and the Chinese expect us to be there when they punch into our buffer zones. We are going to sit on their wing and make sure that they go home. But we do not participate in antagonistic behavior. And so that informal communication between our pilots and theirs is very important to de-escalating.
How significant is the Arctic right now?
Absolutely significant. If you look at the increase in activity from our adversaries into the Arctic over even just the last year, it is significant. Several-fold increase in activity as China, which now considers itself a near Arctic nation, starts to run their dual-use vessels up there. So think of that as a research vessel that also has military capability. And those come right into our area of responsibility. So now we track that, we monitor that, we make sure there's nothing nefarious going on. And the activity has certainly increased, as has ours. With our redefinition of our lines recently, Greenland is now a part of our area of responsibility, very intentionally in a cooperative relationship with Denmark, Canada, and the United States to make sure that we have that part of the Arctic covered as well. So it's certainly a hot spot for the entire globe.
So does China have vessels where they kind of look like research ships, but there's like a military component?
We certainly suspect so. These research vessels are military capable, and we don't know what their intent is, and that's why we monitor.
I mean, it goes without saying, but this is a 24/7. Are there just people here all the time?
Constantly.
Yeah.
If you got here at very early in the morning, you would see a shift changeover happen, and you'd see a whole lot of people coming out and a whole lot of people going into the building. And then same thing about a third of the way through the day, and then a third of the way through the day. In the middle of the night, you're going to see it again. It is literally manned 24/7.
So this place where we're standing is the spot where we are monitoring to make sure that our adversaries like Russia and China don't spy on us, don't come in. I mean, is there a concern here like about spy? I mean, we've noticed a lot of security.
Yes, we're very thankful for our security teams that make sure that threat is not realistically possible. It is pretty locked down in there to the point that we don't even carry cell phones into those double doors. And same, you can imagine that goes even to the next level when you look at Cheyenne Mountain and when we might deploy up there to make sure we lock down for a significant threat. We keep that exercise constantly so that we're ready to do that when necessary. Security around here is paramount, and it's done very well. And I wouldn't wish that job on any spy to try to break into this headquarters or into the mountain, because I don't think they're going to succeed.
And just my last question, your job is so important. I guess people have to be focused all the time. I mean, something could happen at any moment. I'm just thinking, like with my job, I might have an easy day where I just kind of chill out. I mean, you guys really you can't even take like a 10-second break, right? I mean.
Yep. It is an interesting part of our psyche. We like to play offense, right? We like to be proactive as human beings. Defense is hard because you're just waiting for something to happen. And that very much is the nature of this job, is it appears, especially when you're on shift for that block, that you're waiting for something to happen. But what's important for people to know is that we don't just sit around and wait for a surprise. We are constantly looking at the environment for potential threats, and we are constantly forward posturing and preparing for those threats to arrive. So very little surprises us here. We are able to stay proactive, which does keep us very, very busy, but also keeps us engaged and makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet.
When you have two airlines having an issue, or even an airline getting close to a presidential defense point, for the most part, we are going through the federal agencies who do that every single day, and are letting them handle those situations. So when you talk about law enforcement, that is not NORAD. When you talk about the FAA that owns airspace, that is not NORAD. NTSB that owns safety, not NORAD, and TSA is also not NORAD. However, representatives of those organizations are right here in our operations center with us, so that we have that very, very tight coordination. Now, take that kind of an incursion. If it's an accident, it's going to be handled by the FAA. On the other hand, if it looks nefarious, and let's say that airline starts to turn towards a city and starts to accelerate and descend towards an area that we are defending, that's when it becomes a NORAD problem. That's when it becomes a defense problem, either of critical infrastructure or of one of our key defense points or people. That is when our fighters are going to get involved. So we are certainly aware when two airlines have an incident, especially if it involves Air Force One. But when it comes to the defense side of that, we don't do anything about it until it becomes a defense situation.
Makes sense. Because sometimes I guess most times it is probably an accident.
That's
when
right.
You see the little Cessna that accidentally, you know.
An enormous majority of our TFR violators are not trying to do anything wrong. Nevertheless, those violations put our entire chain of command in a position where they have to get in front of that in case it turns nefarious. So significant consequences for the enterprise and resources spent when somebody violates one of our TFRs because of the response we have to be in front of it. But most of them are innocent, and the pilot just didn't look at the NOTAMs that they should have looked at before they flew. So we really encourage people to look at those NOTAMs.
Colonel, can I ask one?
Yes, ma'am.
We see you training a lot, whether it be in Alaska. Just this week, there was some training in Washington, D.C. We're going to see a little bit of, maybe training tomorrow.
Yep.
When the rest of us train, this is super important for you.
Yes.
Tell us why. Is it muscle memory? Is it going through weird scenarios?
Yeah.
Training.
Training for us is crucial, and training for us has to feel real. And I will say that our enterprise is extraordinarily good at making training feel real. When I went through my initial training as Chief of Operations in the Joint Operations Center, I was sweating and was probably more anxious than when I was flying a fighter jet for the last time. I mean, you are really in it. These scenarios feel real, they look real, they get you engaged, they get you focused, and they can go on for hours. But we do that because we won't have the luxury of a spin-up when something real happens. We have to be ready literally 24/7, 365. So we train constantly to keep ourselves in the right mindset to defend when something does go wrong, and maintain that constant stance of readiness for homeland defense.
I have one more. When you put out, last week there was the Alaska Defense Zone.
Yes.
And then one time in August there were 3 in 1 week.
Yes.
And then NORAD always puts out, this is a routine matter. And, I guess, I'm reading, I'm like, doesn't sound routine.
Yeah.
And then I also think, well, there's a serious component, because with a little mistake,
Right.
this could so
Yep.
talk me through this. This is a routine matter when I'm gravely concerned.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess to her point too, like when you were saying when the fighter pilots are on the wing of a Chinese
Yes.
planer, it's represents something so much bigger
It does.
than just what's happening with those two planes.
Yes. When our airspace is penetrated by a foreign actor, we take it very seriously, and we respond as professionally as you can imagine. So when we say that is routine, what we mean is that happens approximately 20 times a year. So it's only routine for us because we are very prepared for it, we are postured for it, and we train for it constantly. And that allows us to stay professional. So when you think of something that sounds really scary, like a Chinese bomber pushing into our airspace or a Russian bomber pushing into our airspace, it can become scary very quickly if our pilots lose their professionalism, become antagonistic, or if their pilots become antagonistic. You can imagine how that could escalate. Now, fortunately on our side, we train to where we are never going to be the cause of that. We are very professional on the wing. We film, we watch, we sit in a position of tactical advantage. If we were to need to activate that and do something about it, we could do so very quickly. But we make sure that we maintain enough of a buffer to not cause the problem, and make sure that it's on them for flying into our airspace and creating that problem in the first place. We're very good at it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.